It is August, which means it is Child Support Awareness Month, and I am lucky to have the Champaign County Department of Job and Family Services with me today. Stacy Cox, the director, is here. Stacy, if you want to introduce yourself as well as the team that you have here, I'm excited to kind of talk through what your agency can do for our community. But if you want to start with just kind of what your agency does as a whole, and maybe introducing who we have on the call today.
Okay, great. Welcome. Yeah, Brian, like you said, I'm Stacy Cox and I'm the director here at the Job and Family Services in Champaign County. Job and Family Services is the largest human services agency within our county, and we administer four major human service programs. Today, we're here to talk about child support, and we'll dive a little deeper into that later. But in addition to child support, we also administer public assistance benefits, which includes our SNAP benefits, previously known as food assistance or um, food stamps, OWF, cash assistance, Medicaid. We have several different Medicaid programs and various other ancillary services through public assistance. We also administer social service programs, which is really our child protective services and our adult protective services. And then our workforce development unit, which runs our Ohio Means Jobs Center, that is really charged with the responsibility of helping folks to find employment or find employment that better helps them make a living wage. All these programs work together and interchangeably to support one another, all for the end goal of helping our residents be self sufficient, healthy, educated, and, for what we're here today to talk about, to support their children. So, with me, I am proud to say that we have our county's subject matter experts in child support. First, I'm going to introduce Shelley Folk, who is our child support administrator. She leads our child support department and helps all the various different positions work together to ensure that children get the support that they need. Additionally, I have Angie Hildebrand, who is our hearing officer, and you'll probably hear a lot from her later about ways in which you can modify orders when it's appropriate, all of those types of things. And then last but not least, we have our staff attorney, Valerie Smith, with us today. And really, her focus is to work with the entire team, but she finds herself more involved in the enforcement activities that happen within our department. So they will dive deep into kind of what to expect, what kind of things we offer, and go through the weeds. So thank you, Ryan.
That's awesome. Thank you all for being with us today. I just want to kind of start with maybe going through, the child support process. I think that's the easiest way. You guys are involved with everything from start to finish of making sure that this gets done and that kids are taken care of in our community. So let's start with what are some of the ways that a child support order can get started?
You either can fill out an application for services, a child support application for services. If you return that to our office, we would then start the process of establishment of paternity and support if needed. Also through court orders or referrals from Job and Family Services if someone's receiving public assistance, or if a child is in children's services, we receive referrals from children's services as well.
And then once it gets started and it's established, what are some reasons why a child support order may be modified?
The modification request form has multiple criteria on it. The one that applies to everybody is if it's been 36 months since the last order or since the last review. Anybody qualifies under that criteria, no questions asked. There's multiple other reasons. If you've had a percentage change in your income over a 6-month period of time due to no fault of your own, the removal of a child from an order, military, there's a few for the military. There's also some for incarceration, costs of health insurance and childcare cost changes. But there's several on the list, and if you don't qualify for the 36-month, there might be something else there that you do qualify for.
So along the journey, a child support order is started, maybe even modified through that journey. Um, at what point does a child support order end?
So, through Ohio law, child support continues until the child's 18 or graduated, whichever is later, and it doesn't go past the 19th birthday. So, if you have a child that has a later birthday in the year, such as like a September, October birthday, their support order, they may be turning 19 before they're actually out of high school, but it's not going to go past their 19th birthday.
Gotcha. Um, and obviously, those three elements of modification, starting it and ending it is the journey of a child support order. But there's a lot that probably happens in between there, right? So,
That's correct.
can we talk a little bit around the enforcement? Maybe some of the ways your agency ensures that those payments are getting paid, or if there's issues with a child support order along the way. What kind of things does your agency do to assist with that?
We have case managers here that monitor the cases from the beginning of the support order all the way to the end when it's terminated. And they are every single day watching the orders, making sure that payments are coming in. If those payments fall behind, the first thing they do is contact the person who's supposed to be paying and say, hey, what's going on? If the person is not paying and they don't have a valid reason for why they're not paying, then we have a variety of enforcement actions that the case managers can start taking. And so one of the most common thing that people know about is that case managers can issue something called an income withholding order to a person's employer, and so they can start garnishing money directly out of that person's paychecks to make sure that those payments are coming on time. We can also work with the person who's paying. If they want to pay it directly out of their bank account, we can get that set up. Then if the person is not paying, we have some methods such as intercepts. We can intercept lottery winnings. We can intercept federal and state tax returns. We can send orders to financial accounts like bank accounts and potentially intercept funds from people's checking accounts. Then ultimately, one of the final enforcement methods that we will take is a case might be referred to me, and then I will file a motion for contempt with the court, which is asking the court to find that the person has failed to comply and pay their child support order without justification. And at that point in time, at a hearing, if we give them another chance to pay their order and catch themselves up, and if they do that, then we'll dismiss our motion for contempt. But if we have to go forward to that hearing, I will show up at the hearing and I will explain, what the payments have been, when the last payment was made, and I'll ask the court to find that person in contempt and to sentence them to some jail time. And so that's kind of our last ditch effort to use the potential threat of jail time to convince some people to pay their child support.
One thing to add to that is none of those things happen unless the person's in default. And what default means is it's equal to or greater than 1 month's support amount. They receive a default notice. Once they receive that default notice, all the other things that Valerie explained starts happening if they're 30 days or more behind in child support.
And I
Um,
also want to add to that, if you don't mind, Ryan.
yeah.
So those are the actions that we take, but we do a lot more than that, especially with our case managers. As I said earlier on, is all our departments work together very closely, and our goal is to help people be self-sufficient, and part of that is providing children support. So they do work with families or obligors, if you will, those with the support order, to find out maybe what some of those barriers to making a payment are, and help them problem solve through it, or help them get referrals to my Ohio Means Job Center. Maybe they're underemployed, or maybe they need some technical training to get a job with a higher wage. They also provide those soft level services, because our real goal is to help the whole family become self-sufficient.
One of the other things that's offered that the case managers do is they'll request a compliance payment so that it doesn't have to get to court. Say, hey, here's, if you can make this payment by this date, we'll ask. And as far as I know, I'm not a case manager, but that's still something that they're using that's on the table. And license suspension, warning letters to let them know, hey, reach out to us, or we haven't been able to make contact with you. Let's see if we can do something before it results in this.
Yeah, those are great points because I think that, from a general consensus of the public, a lot of people probably have skewed opinions of what your agency does, right? And from the child support side. And I think that it's important that to hear that you're not focused on just going after people that can't pay their child support. Right? Your focus is how do
Mhm.
you best support this child in the
Right.
situation that they're in, right? It wasn't that child's choice to be in that situation, and you're trying to make sure that they have what they need to be able to have a decent childhood. And I think that like you said, Stacy, connecting those dots to other resources in our community not only helps the situation if they're not able to make child support payments, but it also allows that family to better off their income, or to be able to be in a better spot once
Mhm.
this child does turn 18 or 19 and is now off child support. Everyone is in a better place if you can make that all work. Plus, our community is in a better place in that scenario as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you walk me through a little bit about what goes into calculating a child support payment? What factors go into that? I think there's a lot of misconception around what somebody should or shouldn't pay based on income on both sides, and if people get married and don't, all these different factors. When it comes down to it, what are the main factors that go into a calculation?
So, a regular child support order where mom and dad work, or one of them doesn't work, it's just a basic, simple. New guidelines came out in 2018. We are only looking at your gross income. Some mandatory work related deductions. Some people pay union dues. I'll deduct those before I put that income information in. Do you have other children that are biologically yours or adopted by you that are not a party to the case? Those are credits that are given. The calculations are all inside the guidelines. So when we add those numbers, put those numbers in there, it calculates it. Cost for private health insurance, if you're paying out of pocket for that, for the parties of the case. It could probably get a little crazier if your current spouse is carrying the kids on the health insurance, but it's your child support order, they don't get credit. But whatever the parties of the case are paying for private health insurance, childcare costs, there's a guideline in there based on ages. What is the maximum that they would get for childcare costs? Check me if I'm wrong, Shelley. I don't think there was anything else on a basic one. Then you have people that maybe they own properties, they own rentals, they are farmers, those can get crazy because those we're looking at, income taxes with all their, stuff that they have to claim or don't claim or can write off or can't write off. But just a basic one is pretty simple. Your income, those few deductions, and that's it.
So yeah, it sounds like there's a lot that goes into that. It isn't just somebody looked at someone and said, you're going to pay this amount, which I think is
It's
kind
not a
of
chart.
the
Correct. It's
misconception
not a
of
chart.
Yeah.
They
child
don't
support
go,
orders, right?
Ohio.
you make
There's a
this and
lot
you
of
make,
factors with that.
yep.
Right.
It takes
Ohio.
both parties. Yeah. It takes
Sorry,
both
he's
parties'
going.
income information to come up with that calculation. And it's not just a chart that you can go, oh, two people in the home and this. Yeah. I wish that'd be nice.
Yeah. So Ohio is a shared income state. So what Angie is explaining is it's based on both mom and dad's income. So they take those incomes, add those together, and then come up with the deductions that she has been explaining off of there to come up with a support order.
And I would just add to that and say that the income they're taking into consideration is only the parents' income. It is
Right.
not their spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends. We don't take into consideration those people's income because, as we know, relationships sometimes break down and that's not necessarily reliable. Also, those people don't have a legal duty to take care of their significant other's child necessarily. And then, of course, one of the great things is that the guideline calculation is a recommendation, which means that if it goes before the court can always decide that that is not appropriate and not in the best interest of the child. The parents can always ask the court to say, hey, please take into consideration something else that is going on with us. We both see the kid an equal amount of time. We both share all the costs of, taking care of our child together. We get along really great. Can you please deviate that support order or lower that amount because that would be better for our child? And the court might say, hey, you know what? You're right. That does make sense. Let's go ahead and deviate this down by a certain amount or maybe deviate it all the way down.
And to add to what Valerie just said, through our administrative processes at our office, through the establishment process, and through the review and adjustment modification process, the parties have 14 days that they can object and request court hearing if they disagree with anything that we have put out there for them. So they have that time that they can object and request further hearing to take it to court to do those things that Valerie's explaining.
Very cool. Do you guys have any success stories or, I know you can't share names, but is there any kind of situations that you could share that, I think a lot of good things probably happen inside of your agency that you can't necessarily share publicly because there's direct people in our community that are affected and we can't share names. But in general, do you see or can you share a situation that that has been very successful for Champaign County?
I can start off with one that I had recently just a year ago. This was an older case. The parents divorced many years ago, and the the mother was the obligor. She was the woman who was ordered to pay child support to dad, who was taking care of their kids. She stopped paying her child support in 2008, and we actually had filed a contempt action against her, and the court had issued a warrant for her, found her in contempt, and issued a warrant for her arrest because she failed to show up at the jail to serve her jail sentence. By the time that I was reviewing this case in 2024, that warrant was still outstanding. Nobody could find her. She had dropped off the face of the earth, and she owed over $20,000 in arrears to her ex-husband, to the father. And that was, I'm sure, very frustrating for him because he wasn't getting the support he needed to raise those kids. He did it all by himself and raised them into adulthood. But lo and behold, in 2024, law enforcement managed to find her, and they transported her all the way back to our county. And that same day, I showed up at court and we had a hearing, a bond hearing, and the court allowed her to pay more than half of what she owed on those child support arrears to get out of jail. And she was since remarried, and so her new husband had driven all the way to Champaign County with that money in cash and paid it. And I know that our case manager, who had been working that case the whole time that order was in effect, who had been enforcing that case all these years, trying to locate her, trying to find ways to get money to get this order paid for the father to support those kids. She got to call that man and tell him that we had finally gotten her located and that he was going to be getting a very large sum of money. And we are still enforcing that order, and we will continue to enforce it until all of those arrears are paid in full.
Yeah, and
That's
just to,
awesome.
just to kind of explain how old that order is, because I don't think you said that part of it. That was a
Mhm.
1997 divorce. So
Wow.
we try not to give up. We try to collect as long as we can. So
That's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, I would say about most of our cases, everyone does what they're supposed to do. But every so often, we have some where they don't do what they're supposed to do, and that's an example of that. But we don't give up on any of those cases, even if the warrant has been outstanding since 2008, and it's been almost 20 years. We will continue to enforce. We will continue to collect because that money is still owed, and it's important that it gets paid.
For sure. I also think, one of the things that stood out to me when you were telling that story too is that you mentioned that it was the mother that was having to pay the father in that situation. And I think it's a misconception that it's always the dads that have to get the child support. They're the ones that always have to pay. You want to kind of speak to that a little bit around
Yeah.
the reality of what it is that you guys do?
Yeah, life is not that straightforward for I think anybody. Families are very complicated. People have children, they get married, they get divorced, they have children when they're not married, they get new boyfriends. It could be either parent that's ordered, or even both parents that are ordered to pay child support to somebody else who's raising their child for them. So I would give another example, another success story we sort of have about a man who is a father, and he has two children that are his biological children, and then another child that he is raising who is not his biological child. And this man kind of hits all of those areas. He pays child support for one of his children. He does everything he's supposed to do. He pays child support for one of his children. He and the mother of the other child and the mother of the child that is not biologically his, she is ordered to pay him child support. This case was kind of difficult as well because that mother was difficult to locate. So our father, he had had a child with one woman, and they had established the child support order, and he was paying, doing everything he was supposed to. And then his girlfriend, who he had this child with, and she had a child from a prior relationship, she disappeared one day. She just left the kids with him and hit the road. And so he was taking care of both of those kids. The father of the one child that's not biologically his, he was never involved in the picture, so he wasn't getting support from either of those parents for that child. And he was a single father in that situation, and he worked a good job, he made good money, but that's tough on a person who pays their child support like they're supposed to and is not getting any financial support for two other children. In fact, it got pretty bad for him at one point, and he had to move in with a relative to help cut costs. And this entire time, we were working on locating the mom and the biological father of the other child to get orders established for him. We were able to find the biological father, who was actually super cooperative once we found him. I don't know if he really knew what was going on, but he was ordered to pay child support, and he's been faithfully paying that child support to our other man who's taking care of the child. And we were able to find the mom and get her ordered to pay child support. And we're in the process of enforcing that order to get money to go to this man who's taking care of both these children. So he is what we would call a custodial parent father who pays. And we also use the terminology absent parent father or absent parent mother for the individual who is supposed to pay child support. So he receives support, he pays support, and he's what we would call a caretaker, who is a non parent legal custodian raising a child as well. So I personally was very impressed with how well he was able to navigate the situation that he was in. And I was really happy that we were able to get those orders started, and we will enforce those orders very seriously, because at the end of the day, when those orders are not enforced, that is bad for the child, because that child is not getting financial support that they deserve and are entitled to.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
think I just want to comment on that because, I'm sitting here as Valerie's talking about that, and I just have chills as a director, because what that whole story I think clearly demonstrates the client focused approach that we take. We're not dealing with widgets. We're not just, you got to do this, because we're getting to know what the dynamic is and really approaching our services with, like I said, a client focused lens, really just to do our best to make sure that the child gets what the child, deserves to grow and develop and thrive. So anyways, I just want to highlight that, because that really, I mean, was a clear example of the type of work that our case managers and our agency does, to better understand what is needed to accomplish the goal.
I agree, Stacy. I was just sitting here thinking the complexities of all of that to be able to navigate. That just shows that you're looking at all of these different scenarios. This one gentleman happened to be in the middle of multiple scenarios, but that was just a handful that you're not just putting everyone in one box and you have to pay, X amount
Right.
because, of XYZ. It is, what is this family's dynamic? What is the situation? There's how does that situation intertwine with other family situations, right? And as families grow and move around. The other thing that I've heard you guys talk about several times too is locating somebody sometimes out of state. How does it work when you have one of the parents that are outside of Ohio? Does that make things harder, or do you work with other agencies in other states? Kind of walk me through what that process looks like.
So if someone leaves the state of Ohio and moves out of, we no longer have jurisdiction over that person or that body. So if someone moves to, let's say, Michigan, an obligor moves to Michigan, what we would do then, once we verify the information that that person is residing in another state, is we send, it's called an interstate case. Then we send it to the other state to request services for them to enforce our Ohio child support order. And we can also do the same thing if it's an establishment case. So if we're trying to establish paternity or child support, we can also send it to the other state to request them to do those establishments. So yes, we work closely, and the same thing happens if somebody moves to Ohio. They're sending the request to our state to ask for us to enforce the Florida order or whatever state that the original order is from.
Makes sense.
And we also have some cases that are in another country. I have a Canada
Yep.
case.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we all
Yeah.
work together, all over the state of
Right.
Ohio and outside the state of Ohio, because these orders exist to support the child, to make sure that the child is provided for. So we have something, not to get too legal, but we have something called UIFSA, is an acronym, and this is a law that all of our states have adopted that allows us to work together across state lines to make sure that the child support order follows the child and follows the parties, the parents, so that it continues to do what it's supposed to do and that that child is still being provided for.
That's
tried a
awesome.
couple of times with paternity and support establishment through the administrative process, that if you can kind of get a feel from the parties, how it's going to go just by having conversation with mom or whoever's requesting our services. Sometimes I'll even reach out and see if the party that's out of state will cooperate and let me do it administratively, because we can send a wage withholding to that employer. And then if it gets to a point where we're not having any luck and they're not paying, then we can introduce it as an interstate case. But I've had a few cases that have cooperated, let me establish paternity. We schedule paternity testing in the state they're in, and then let me establish the administrative order. When I present to them, if we do it this way, then we don't necessarily have to go through the court. And sometimes that's a little more appealing to them.
Yeah.
But,
And, that,
and
and
then
that,
sometimes it,
that's called long arm jurisdiction. So we're allowed to do that through that long.
Mhm.
But it's only if, like Angie said, they cooperate. She has them sign waivers. And if they're turning in all their information and cooperating through her process, we're allowed to go ahead and establish administratively that way.
It's very cool. It's cool because I'm sitting here thinking, if someone moves outside of our state, out of Ohio, that becomes an issue for you, but that's also an issue for any other state coming into Ohio. So to hear that
Yes.
collaboration and to be able to have that support to continue to follow and support that kid, no matter where, if it's a state or even country, which is something I hadn't even thought of until Angie brought that up, is if somebody moves to another country or takes a job somewhere else, the possibility to still make sure that that kid has the support that they need to be able to grow up. Do you
Right.
guys have any numbers to kind of sh walk me through, like, the amount of cases? Like, what is it that you guys are doing in numbers? Like, what kind of impact are you guys having?
Okay, so we normally have around 2,500 cases. We in 2024, we collected 5,555,698.80. That was hard to say. These funds go directly towards supporting the children and families who rely on them every day. It's a big responsibility, and we're proud to help families get the financial support that they deserve and need.
Just wanna make sure I heard that right. Over $5.5 million for
Correct.
2,500 cases just in Champaign County.
That's correct.
And that's all dollars that are supporting kids that have found themselves, in a situation that could very easily be where they're not getting the support that they need. So that's amazing to hear. That's a huge impact to our county, and I applaud all of you for being a part of that, because that's impressive to know that an agency like yours can have that type of an impact on something that could very
Mhm.
easily be left to the wayside. And then not only are you helping those on an active basis, you're also going after people from the 90s, of divorces from the
Right.
90s, still making sure, like, hey, that kid
Mhm.
deserved this.
Mhm.
This was
Right.
something that it wasn't their choice, and you're still making sure that people true up on what they needed to do as a parent. That's awesome. I've got some random questions here to just kind of go through. Some of these we may have touched a little bit, but I'm going to kind of go through them and give you guys the opportunity to answer. So what if one of the parents loses their job? What happens?
So if they lose their job, they may already have what's called a seek work order that the court included in their child support order, which says if you lose your job, you need to report to child support and let them know you lost your job. If they have that and they contact us and let us know they lost their job, or if they just call their case manager and say they lost their job, what their case manager will do is they will often refer them to Ohio Means Jobs, and so that way they can get assistance with creating a resume, interviewing, getting help with training and skills so that they can get reemployed very quickly. Um, and we do get reports. Sometimes we get hits with reports where it lets us know that somebody's lost their job. So even if they don't contact us and tell us, we may send them a letter in the mail and say, "Hey, we see that something's going on," and we have like pamphlets and brochures with Ohio Means Jobs information in it so that they can contact them. And so long as they are showing us that they are working on trying to get a new job, like if they go to OMJ to get help, we can ask them and we can ask OMJ if they've been showing up and really trying their best to get a job. And if they have, we won't go after them super hard and try to send them to jail or anything crazy like that, because we know that they are down on their luck. So they've had something unfortunate happen to them and they are doing their best to recover from that. I know that specifically OMJ has a lot of various different programs that can help people not just find jobs, but if they qualify, if they've been paying their child support and they qualify, they might even be able to get assistance with rent, utilities, car repairs, and that's in addition to everything else that Job and Family Services already offers to help people.
That's awesome. The thought of a parent losing their job and they're trying to do the right thing, which it sounds like a lot of people in our community are trying to do the right thing. I love the concept of, yes, there's an initial problem to your agency of these payments might not get paid, right? but you're looking at it as a whole county of like, well, this is still somebody that isn't going to be able to not only pay child support, but they're not going to be able to pay their rent or their mortgage or their car payment. And those things start to pile up to where they might not be able to get to work, right? So how do we get them back on the right foot and give them resources that can get them through that down moment to keep them moving forward? Because a lot of times, someone will lose a job and it wasn't because of them. The company may be downsizing or moving or things that are out of their control. I love that community approach that, how do we solve the actual problem as opposed to just trying to band-aid a child support problem in this scenario, right?
And I can have Angie add to like the scenario that you just provided as far as if someone was employed and their company downsized or they were laid off or they've had a 30% change of income. I'll let Angie take it from there as far as what she does with the modification process.
Yeah, and that's what when you said that, Ryan, I was going to say that's a service that the modification review and adjustment request. One of those criteria is you've had a mass layoff or a plant closing. I mean, we've experienced that right here in Urbana before when we've had the paper mill closed down and other issues, and people were paying. Those are criterias that someone can qualify for, so that we can do a review. Um, and again, it's a recommendation, and maybe, the other party knows what's going on and it's something that maybe they can come to an agreement on or something that they can work on, but we can at least be the avenue to get it into court for them, so that that person can explain the situation. But yes, if you've lost a job and it's due to no fault of your own, I mean, there's specific criteria that's listed, 30% change, no fault of your own over a specific amount of time. Yeah, we definitely want to help those people. Those are the ones that, that hopefully they reach out and utilize the review and adjustment process.
Right.
And I want to add and go back to what Valerie was saying as well, when she was talking about the supports through our Ohio Means Jobs program. Early on, I mentioned our public assistance programs and all the ancillary programs within. One of them is our prevention, retention, and contingency plan. And that is emergency assistance for families or non-custodial parents, such as, payment of a rent payment, car repairs, work boots, various different things that might be needed to help support not just families, but non-custodial parents who have been actively paying their child support. So again, I know I keep driving that client-centered approach and how it ties into the entire organization working together on behalf of the child.
Well, that's awesome. Um, Angie, you kind of spoke to this a little bit, so I've got another that kind of leads into the next question. What if two parents want to come to an agreement and say, "Hey, we decided this is what we want to do"? Are they able to do that?
Yes and no. Again, if it's something that they qualify for a review and we do the review process, I have to use the income, I have to use all the correct information. But again, we offer that 14-day period where they can object to the review, get it into court. And in a situation where maybe there's no benefits being received by the state, the court looks at those. And if the parties are in agreement, I mean, I'd say pretty much every case that I don't ask for a percentage, but if parties are in agreement and they present it to the court, then the court is going to accept that, and then they put out a new entry. Same thing with an establishment situation when we're establishing right off the bat. Sometimes parties come in and they want that order on paper and in an order form, but they have an idea in their head what they already want it to be. Again, I have to run the guidelines based on their information. They have a 14-day objection period where they file an objection with the court to the administrative order, and then present their information to the court again. And as long as there's no benefits through the state, no cash assistance or medical card, the court will take a look at that. And normally they would say, sure, if that's what you guys agree upon.
And
So,
when we talk about the objection process, I just want to add real quick that when people go to the court directly and they leave us out of it and they start their case, they have to pay filing fees. If they have an attorney, they have to pay the attorney. If they do their process with us, it costs them nothing at any point during that experience. They when they file their objection, they send it to us and we file it for them so they don't have to pay to get it in front of the court. So that
but
is
that's
a
not for
great perk.
divorces or
'Cause
whatever.
there are plenty of people out there who have very limited income, who can't afford an attorney, who can't afford filing fees to memorialize an agreement that they have with the other parent, and maybe they really need that agreement in writing. So they can do that with us.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
if they start through a dissolution process, anytime there's any type of court action, our administrative process has to back out.
Gotcha.
So we can't get involved if they're at court. Now, if they go through the court and do a dissolution and the court does not address child support in any way, then they could come into our office afterwards and request services, and we possibly could assist them depending upon how their order is actually wrote. So
Gotcha.
if
That
they
makes
fi
sense.
I mean, ultimately, if they're at court, they should go ahead and get it taken care of through the court, but we can assist through some administrative processes, but anything the court's gonna do, obviously, is going to trump our administrative process.
Makes
But to add to that, though, parties can come in, a party can come in that is married and request a
Yes.
support order without going through a divorce or
Right.
dissolution. We can do that for them.
Right.
Gotcha.
But once they file the divorce or dissolution, that's going to take over whatever administrative order we may have.
Right. Our office can help assist paternity establishment. So what that means is if unmarried couple has a child and they did not sign the affidavit of paternity at the hospital when the child was born, no paternity has not been established for that child. So the father's rights have not been established. So they
Mhm.
can come into our office for free of charge, fill out an application for services, and then we administer the paternity test. And then paternity is established for that child if that father is found to be if that's the person's found to be the father. Also, if you have a situation where in Ohio, if you're married, it's a presumption that you are the father of the child, whether or not maybe somebody separated 5 years ago, they just never have had funds to get a divorce,
Mhm.
but they have a baby with someone else. They can come into our office, complete application. We would test all 3 parties. We would test the mom, the, new spouse or boyfriend, and the, husband. And then we would make a determination of paternity, and then that would remove the husband who's not the biological father and put the biological father's name on the birth record.
With just one example of a case, which is a very sort of strange situation. It doesn't happen very often, but something that we were able to do is we had a woman who had a child with a man, and they were not married. And then, unfortunately, that man actually passed away. And so paternity was not established while he was alive.
Mhm.
And he had worked and he paid into Social Security, and Social Security had funds that they could pay the child death benefits, they could pay to the child for the child's care, but because paternity was not established, they couldn't pay the child couldn't receive that money. So we were actually able to establish paternity working with the coroner. We were able to establish paternity and get that birth certificate corrected so that the family could go to the Social Security
Right.
office and finish up with them.
Awesome.
For a small county, we've actually had 2 cases for sure, that's been the situation. And again, small county, you don't that doesn't
Right.
but yeah.
No, it's just another way to show that, like, your agency is constantly solving problems, helping, like it isn't just this cookie cutter, every single thing that comes across your desk. I feel like some people think the child support is like,
Yeah.
okay, yep, stamp, put it on. You guys are looking at every one of these individually. You're understanding the situation, and you are doing your best to do whatever you can to help that child is the core piece of that, and to make sure that the whole family dynamic is included in that decision. That's
great.
amazing.
I think being a small town too, I mean, you're just more involved in it. You know, we have less numbers.
We're
So not that we don't have a lot of numbers, because we do have a lot of numbers, but um, yeah, I think it's easier to be more personable
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's our
hands-on and
community.
we're able,
yeah,
we're able to give better service, I think, sometimes than
I think so.
larger counties, because you can only imagine they have tons and tons of cases. So
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I want to go through a couple more questions here, and some of these we've kind of touched on, but I think they're questions that a lot of people have, so I think it's worth taking a little time to dive in. We already kind of spoke to the child support or when that ends, and I think that you cleared that up as far as does it end when it's 18? That's a question that we had on here, and it's not always. It's depending on the age of the child and when they
Mhm.
graduate. Some other questions I have around that though are. Can can you pay the child directly? I think that's a question people always think, like, "I don't wanna pay my ex-wife, my ex-husband, can I just make sure this only goes to the child?" Is that something that's a possibility?
No.
only if it's a court order.
I
Yeah.
can't answer that
Not even
quickly.
after emancipation.
Yeah,
Then
only if there's a
No,
court
yeah.
order.
No, if you give the child money, that's a gift that you're giving the child. That's not child support. The child support order is between the people that are listed on the order. So whoever the order says is paying the money, that's the person who pays, and whoever the order says is receiving the money, that's the person who's receiving the money. If you pay the child directly, you're just a great person who gives your child an allowance, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
and in those strange situations where maybe a 17-year-old decides to go live with grandma or somebody else because they're not getting along with parents, that can't go directly to the child. And like I said, the only time that that would ever happen is if they would go back through court and file. So, or let's say maybe the custodial parent passes away. Um,
hmm
still have to go back through court because the order that we would have would be going towards that deceased mother. So, or custodial parent.
if 2 parents decide that they want to just do 50-50 custody, they're in agreeance, does that mean that no child support needs to be established?
Not necessarily. So there could still be a child support order, but like Angie had mentioned before, the parties can potentially agree to a deviation, or there's that long laundry list of factors that are considered when calculating child support, which might naturally lower the amount of child support that would be expected based on like extended parenting time and things like, and then potentially if the parties are not receiving public assistance, they might be able, the court might allow them to agree to a deviated support.
Gotcha. What if the ex won't let the other parent, the paying parent, see the kids? Are they allowed to just stop paying? What does that look like?
I'll
Yeah,
answer that too.
that's just-
No. So your parenting time and your child support order are two separate issues, because they're separate orders. They might be in one same big order packet, but they're technically separate orders. Um, if a if one parent doesn't follow the parenting time arrangement, that is an issue on its own that needs to be addressed by the court. If one parent doesn't follow the child support order, that's something that we can address. So they are separate issues. So it goes both ways. For example, if you're paying child support and the other parent isn't letting you see the child, you still have to pay child support. And then vice versa, if something happens to you and you become like temporarily disabled, maybe you're in a car accident and you missed your monthly obligation, and so the other parent says, well, you're not going to get to see the kid this month until you pay. They can't do that either. that's also a violation of.
Now that's a good way to think about separating those out because I think the way that oftentimes if you go through a divorce, you go through that process, they're kind of all put together in this same bucket, and you're thinking about the kids and you're paying for the kids, and so that leads me to my next question: does the dollars that are paid that goes to the other parent do those dollars have to be spent on the child, or how does that work?
No, we do not make anyone give us, itemization of how they're spending that money. That is calculated to help with, living expenses such as your housing, your food, your electric, your water, clothes for the child, all of the things that we do to live. But we're also not going to, we cannot have someone provide something that gives me an itemized list of how they're spending it. So if, let's say, an obligee is, has a job, so they're also contributing to that household, they're paying their rent, their utilities, buying groceries, paying for the school fees, all those types of things, but yet they get their child support check and they decide to go get their nails done. I'm not going to do anything about that because there's nothing we can do. We can't say that you can't do that and they're still supporting that child.
Yeah, because they are supporting the child financially. The
Right.
money that
Right.
you're paying under your support order is money that is going into their household to raise the amount of income that that household has coming in so that it can pay so that all the bills can be paid. And when we think about the order is supposed to assist that person with providing for the care for the child, that care of a child includes a lot of things. It includes the child's needs,
Right.
the child's wants. The child needs shoes, the child wants Jordans, and so you have to take into consideration the fact that the person who's receiving that money might spend it in a way that you think isn't absolutely necessary, or you might say, well, that isn't really for the child directly. Just because it's not for food or toilet paper, doesn't mean that that money isn't going to support the child.
It's a good call. I have one more question here. Can I sign off my rights to my child because the other parent doesn't allow my visitation? Am I able to get rid of an order by just saying, okay, I'm going to sign away my child since I don't see them anymore?
No. Not really. When you have a legal parent child relationship with a child, the only thing that's going to terminate that parent child relationship is an adoption. So that you can potentially sign away certain rights, but you don't necessarily sign away your responsibilities as a parent
Right.
unless that parent child relationship is legally terminated. And that's only going to be legally terminated when a new parent steps in and adopts your child and forms a new parent child relationship.
Right.
That makes perfect sense. Um, where if someone's listening to this or watching this and they're like, hey, I think that this is something that I need to explore, get more information on, where are the best places for them to get more information?
Well, I'll start with our website. We through our website, which is champaigndjfs.org, we have different tabs for different programs. If you go within the child support program, there's a wide array of information and linked resources for you to access. I will also share through our Facebook page, all of our programs, we share real-time updates. If there is new and innovative things coming up or out there, we promote that there. And then I know Shelley was about to talk as well about, resources in regards probably to the revised code, administrative code, and other things. So Shelley, I'll kick it to
Yeah.
you to go through those.
So Ohio's website is a wealth of knowledge. So I would highly suggest anybody that has any question regarding child support You could definitely start there and get information. It's jfs.ohio spelled out .gov backslash OCS for Ohio Child Support, and there is a ton of information. It has the Ohio Revised Codes, the Ohio Administrative Codes. It has a guideline calculator if you're just curious and you pretty much know what the other party is earning. You could go in and punch in the figures yourself, because we are not allowed to do a guideline calculation unless we actually have an application on file. So if you wanted to just say, hey, I wonder what my child support order would be, you could go in on that calculator. It would give you an idea of what you would get for child support, or what you'd be paying in child support if you go ahead and come through our office or go through the court. So I would highly suggest start there if you have questions. Anytime you could call our office. Any of us are happy to answer any type of questions. Our number is 937-484-1500. Just have the receptionist give the question that you have. She'll direct you to the proper person. We have lots of other resources that we're going to include at the end of this. Hopefully will help somebody if they have questions about child support.
And we will link all of this below as well. So if you're watching this, you can go into the description here. If you're on the Department of Job and Family Services page, or if you're on YouTube, you can go to a lot of these resources directly below. Is there anything that we feel like we've missed?
I would just say that I always encourage people who do have a child support order, or who are trying to get a child support order started, to remember to please always communicate with your agency, with your case manager about your case. Let us know when you move. Let us know if you get a different job. Let us know if you're going through a hardship, whatever that hardship might be. So that way we can take that into consideration and potentially offer you access to resources or assistance. If you need financial assistance, we can potentially refer you over to whoever you need to be referred to see if you qualify for some assistance. I know sometimes people are afraid of child support, the agency and child support, and they're afraid because they know that I file contempt actions, right? They know that there's a possibility of jail time, and they're afraid of that jail time. Most of the people that I see that end up doing jail time, it's because they don't communicate. They don't communicate with their case manager. They don't show up to their hearings. They don't participate. They don't advocate for themselves. So please advocate for yourself, because we're people too, and we know that bad things happen sometimes. So please just communicate with us so we can try to help get you back on the right track.
Right. And we understand it's frustrating. I mean, some of us have been in your shoes,
Yeah.
but we're here to help.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, this was awesome. I've learned so much. Thank you all for everything that you do behind closed doors. I know that agencies like yours are making a huge impact, but you don't necessarily get the recognition, or sometimes you just get the backlash of just a few of those negatives, or at least the perception of negatives, that people are in situations where they don't think you're doing your job. But I want to personally say, as someone who has paid child support, you've made the process extremely easy. You made it, exactly what you're saying, easy to communicate with. I was never scared of it. Once you accept that you guys are trying to do the right thing, I think that breaks down so many barriers. And when you say that, like, hey, we're trying to do the right thing for this child that's in Champaign County, they're part of our community, that's what we should be doing, and we shouldn't be fighting back on that. And I thank each of you for what you do, and I hope this raises some awareness around child support and all the positive things that are happening inside of your building that, like I said, most people don't even know or wouldn't even think of those kind of situations. So thank you for taking your time sharing it with me, and I look forward to future conversations around other things that your agency is doing as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.